Welcome to the Ask for Football Army Football Show. The Army Football Show is an insider's guide for cadets, old grads, and college football fans to follow the Army team throughout their season as they seek to beat Navy and claim the Commander-in-Chief's trophy. Ask for Football is brought to you by our sponsor, BuyerBarn.com. BuyerBarn.com is the world's first online platform for online sales and auctions of farm animals. That's BuyerBarn.com. Don't forget to follow Ask for Football on all social media platforms or sign up for our mailing list at askforfootball.com/subscribe.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is here. It is Army-Navy week. We are shooting this on Monday of Army-Navy week. T-minus, 5 days or whatever it is until the game, until kickoff. We have the weather forecast. It's not supposed to rain. It's going to be cold as I'll get out, but it's not supposed to rain. We have uniforms. We have spirit videos. It's game week. Guys, thanks for joining this week. Joined by Dan in Coastal Connecticut, Rob in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I'm your host, Jordan, in Atlanta this week. It's Army-Navy. How are we feeling, guys?
Yo, man, I'm nervous, but highly, highly excited by the win that we're going to talk about here in just a minute. Highly excited.
Yeah, I am cautiously optimistic, to steal a phrase from Craig, but I literally think that we got a secret, and Navy's about to find out.
Yes, they are. But before they find out, before we get into that, let's talk about our sponsor, Buyer Barn. Rob, he's your classmate. Why don't you give us the lowdown?
All right, so Buyer Barn, we got a new sponsor here at Ask for Football. It's BuyerBarn.com. I will caveat this, so I'm not going to say the call letters like 87 times. Go to our website on Ask for Football, and there's a whole bunch of hyperlinks that will get you to BuyerBarn.com. But Dan Robinson, my classmate, brother from another mother, ran a traditional co-op for many, many years and realized that there's a way to modernize it. And so he and his co-founder, Dinu, took their IT management and development skills and built out the world's first online farm-to-farm auction. And what it does is it reduces injuries and animal fatigue by taking them and traveling. So you can drive all over the county or all over the state to get to an actual event to sell your animals. It reduces fraud because they actually have a certification system for all the buyers and sellers on the platform. It's fully integrated with secure payment, so you're not running around with a pocket full of cash trying to buy some goats. And then it's convenient, right? So you can sell at your leisure. You put your animals up when you need to, or when you don't want them on there, you can take them off. But you also get better market pricing because it's the same as like, hey, if I put something on eBay or sell it at a yard sale, one of those two things is going to generate more opportunity just because of visibility of the product that I'm trying to sell. But bottom line is, they've been working on this for the last couple of years, and they're rolling it out full scale here with Ask for Football as a partnership. If you need any more information, check the Ask for Football website or go to info@buyerbarn.com.
Sweet.
Back to you.
Thanks, Rob. So, Dan, I see that you have, a little blurb here, and then you have about 2 pages of your thoughts and analysis. So I'm going to read the blurb, and then I'll let you go into your analysis.
Thank you.
Bottom line up front is Army men's swimming beat Navy. And for those of you who aren't friends with Dan, you probably don't understand what a big deal this is. But this is the first time Army men's swimming beat Navy since 1990. For perspective, I was not born yet, and my parents had not met yet. So,
wow.
32 years. The final score was 192-108. Army won 12 out of 16 events with 4 sweeps. We won the 1 meter diving, 1,000 free, 200 free, 100 back, 100 breast, 50 free, 100 free, 200 back, 200 breast, 500 free, 200 IM, 400 free relay. And we swept the 100 free, 50 free, 200 back, and 500 free. Swimming is scored similar to track and field. So each sweep is a lot of points. You get 9 points for first, 4 for second, 3 for third, 2 for fourth, 1 for fifth. A couple notable performances. David Manelis won the 1 meter. Navy has had a massive advantage in diving for literally decades. Bryce Burrow set an academy record in the 1,000 free. Yearling sprinter Owen Harlow won the 50 and the 100. He set the academy record, but actually a new Patriot League record in the 100 free as well. Sam Wesley, who's a Cal, won the 200 back and 200 IM. And then Wes Tate won the 500 with the most dominating performance of the night. Dan, what does this mean? Why should we care?
Well, I mean, you should care because Army beat Navy in a sport, and we're all here for one reason, that's to beat Navy. So this gets us off on the right foot. I remember coming into my plebe year, Army had won 5 of these things in a row, and then things just spiraled out of control. And for years before Navy joined the Patriot League, we were like this close and yet somehow never closed the gap. And then all of a sudden they joined the Patriot League, and it's like, holy crap, how do we get this far behind? But anyway, James and I talked about this a little bit beforehand, saying, this is Army's best chance in a really long time. And I don't think anybody really understood how much better this team had gotten over the course of the last couple of years, and especially this year. I mean, we knew that they had some good recruits. Mike Buddy had told us that last time he was on the show, but that really showed up. Among other things, Army closed the gap in diving. That's a potentially 26-point disadvantage when you get swept on both boards. Still, I wasn't personally planning to watch this until one of my buddies texted me and said, holy crap, Army just swept the 1,000 freestyle. Historically, the Black Knights have had better sprinters, but Navy has had like way better distance swimmers. For them to turn around and sweep, the 1,000 and the 500, that was like a monumental change, which I think is why this meet wasn't close, because Army was always going to win those sprinting events, but then they turn around and swept the 1,000 and the 500, plus, not getting blown out on the diving board. All of a sudden you go from having, one lopsided in one way to things turning the other way. Performances that really stood out to me, and I'm just going to break this down because I know, like we broke down football, and a lot of you people listening to this show don't know any more about swimming than you know about football. Freaking admit it. So, or maybe the reverse of that is true. But anyway, Sam Leslie's 200 IM was freaking amazing. He led from the start off the butterfly, but then, he's pushing it in the backstroke. He turns for the back half, that 50 backstroke, kicks literally 15 yards underwater, just hammered the field. It was unbelievable. I mean, imagine you're running an 880, a heart rate is 185, and you decide you're going to hold your breath for 100 full yards. That's basically what this kid did. I mean, it was really unbelievable. And then the other one, like I said, West Tate's 500, he also dominated from the start, but he gets 3/5 of the way into this race, turns on an 8-beat kick. So he's kicking 8 times for every stroke. Freaking unbelievable. I mean, I just cannot stress to you guys how difficult this is. Swimming 100 free is aerobically similar to about the same effort as running a 440 on the track. So everybody go out and run 1.25 miles on the track for time. Wait until you get 3/5, maybe a little bit more into it, and then turn on the jets and go to fully 100% effort and close faster than you started. That's basically what this kid did in this race. I'm telling you, it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. And he smoked the crap out of everybody. So I don't know if anybody else has got any takes on this meet, but yeah, I was pretty excited. I thought it was awesome. Definitely thought it was worth, especially since we didn't have anything else to review at the top of the show, worth talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that we won for the first time in 32 years is pretty incredible. I know you said what the year before you got there was the last time we had won, Dan.
Yes.
And I saw something on Twitter or Instagram about your roommate polishing the trophy. And can you elaborate on that conspiracy?
No, that was on Instagram. When Navy handed that trophy over, man, it was tarnished. And I was frustrated because, like, the equipment manager, John Doyle, was a retired colonel. At the time he was a plebe. We handed that thing over and it was shiny. We get it back and it's like, did you guys keep this thing in a closet? Like, I understand they've had it for a while, but oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, clearly
little Brasso
to turn it over. So didn't prepare.
Little Brasso. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Rob, do you have any takes on swimming?
No, unless it's rock swimming. I have no input.
Fair enough. All right, well, let's talk about the mortgage business. So last week, if you listen to the show, we had our other sponsor, Craig Oxane, on, and he's the VP of Residential Lending at Draper & Kramer in Chicago. Class of 94, lends in all 50 states, based out of Chicago, one of the biggest VA lenders in the country. I think he's top 1 or 2% in the country. Super competitive rates. Whole mortgage process is super confusing. So go with someone who cares, someone who's going to help educate you through the process. On the show last week, Craig was explaining some of what he does when he takes you through the mortgage process, and also just kind of his thoughts on what's going on right now. And if you're not paying attention to what's going on right now, the real estate market's in a weird place. It's been a weird place for the last couple of years, and Craig's going to help you navigate that. And since he's he can lend in all 50 states. He has a little bit of a unique perspective versus, maybe a realtor who only specializes in one area or a lender who's only in one area. So consider checking Craig out. As an added bonus, he doesn't charge lenders fees for veterans. So that'll save you about $1,300. So if you're looking to refinance or get into something, or get a second home, he talked about now's a great time to buy a second home. Consider doing that and go with Craig and save some money. And now what you've all been waiting for, the Army-Navy preview. So Navy football comes into the game 4-7. They got off to an abysmal start, but they've been playing much better over the last month or so. Defense has been consistently good all season. Offense hasn't really necessarily shown up every time. They started with a loss to FCS Delaware and Memphis. Defense looked, Dan says good. I think it looked okay. Really no offense whatsoever. They beat ECU in overtime despite rushing for just 191 yards for the entire game. And they lost to Air Force 13-10. Well, let's talk about ECU though. Navy went and beat UCF, who has had their difficulties this year. UCF lost to ECU, but then Navy's beaten ECU. So, but the ECU's going to a bowl game and they really turned the season around. Dan, do you think, people say that South Florida is like the best 1-11 team in the country. Do you feel the same way about ECU?
I have only watched very small smatterings. I will say I swam on the ECU campus as a middle schooler, so that's about the extent of my knowledge of the Pirates.
No, I watched the ECU game, and I watch a lot of their highlights because it's on here locally. And I would tell you, they're one of those teams that they're streaky. They're just not consistent. And I think that's been for college football, the teams that are 3-4 or 5-6 or 6-6 right now, it's just consistency. They'll play a great series or a great quarter, and then the rest of them, they're out to lunch. And then sometimes they make great adjustments and other times they don't. And I think really for ECU, that was the thing. Navy, the other part of it is if the game is close, Navy has a chance. And that's what they've shown all season long is, and we'll get into it, but Fofana has always been able to kind of break that last long run when the game is close and set them up for a game-winning field goal or touchdown. And that's a problem, honestly, but that's what I've seen from Navy all season, with the exception of the UCF game. But even still, that was the kind of the same story. They jumped on them early. They kept it close, and you're like, there's no way that UCF is going to lose to Navy. Come on, guys. There's a much better team. And sure enough, as that clock keeps ticking, the closer the game is, the more confident that the mids are, and they think that they can close it out. And that's exactly what's happened for the 4 wins that they've had this season, is it's just been close enough. And then, of course, they're coming in with a high level of confidence, played Notre Dame great. They played UCF great. And now it's okay, does this 2-week layoff come into play? And that's my thing. I think the 2-week layoff gets you healthy, but the timing that you had going into this long break, because they've been inactive since November the 19th. So you're going into almost 3 weeks. And so there's only so much timing that you can work on in practice because it's not game level timing. And I'll pause there.
Yeah. And Rob, I want to bring up a couple things that you said. One, in 2016, Army had a distinct advantage coming to that game because Navy had to play in the American Conference Championship the week before the Army-Navy game. Yes. So they got really beat up in that game against Houston, and they came into Army-Navy, didn't have a lot of preparation. We were able to win. I think last year we had a 3-week break, and we came out looking flat. So it's going to be interesting to see, this year we had UMass was able to do, good things and blow them out. And then we have a week off, and then Army-Navy versus, to your point, Navy they played football. They all went home for Thanksgiving, and they've had, 2 weeks off and just kind of sitting around. And, we know how Navy does when they sit around, after the BYU game in 2020. I don't know if that's a disadvantage to them or not, but it'll be interesting to see how all that timing and scheduling plays out and potentially impacts other schedules in the future.
One thing I'd like to say about this before we sort of move on to breaking this down in detail about this UCF game is, 248 yards on 3.9 yards per carry, held the Knights to 84 yards rushing. That stuff is good. But the next week, UCF gave up 298 yards to USF, who's miserable. And the next week after that, they, just past week, they gave up 254 yards on 8.2 yards per carry to Tulane. They did a decent job on Tajay Spears, but Michael Pratt just ripped them a new butt. I mean, oh my goodness, that game was not close. I mean, and Tulane really tried to give that game away and it still wasn't close.
Yeah, I mean, UCF's run defense has been terrible all season, and they've been inconsistent offensively and defensively. So I'm just going to be honest. Like, after last year going into the Army-Navy game, I was like, oh, we're going to steamroll these guys, right?
Yeah.
We're hearing guys on the Army defense, oh, we're going to shut them out.
I don't want to hear that anymore.
I know we all
never
bought
again
into it, and we're like, oh, we're gonna, it's gonna be over the first half and go, finish the game in a sports bar. It's gonna be great, get out of the cold. And then we came out and flopped. And so I'm trying not to do that again. I'm also trying not to be negative. So there's a part of me that says, yeah, they beat UCF, number 22 team in the country at the time. That's great. But it's like, UCF has been hit or miss all season. And like, the run defense isn't good. All of Navy's strengths play really well against UCF. But then you kind of take a more macro level, and it's like, okay, they beat Temple. Temple's not a great team. That they go into overtime to beat Temple. Only lost to Cincinnati by 10 points. Now, Cincinnati is not the Cincinnati of last year, the year before. They're still a good football team. And they lost to Notre Dame by 3 points. And it's, I understand Notre Dame, once again, not the Notre Dame of last year, but still Notre Dame's a good football team. They lost 35-32, had 255 yards, 5.5 yards per carry, owned the second half, but they only converted 3 out of 11 third downs. So is this Navy football team good and they've just been inconsistent, or have they just gotten lucky a couple times? What do we think?
Let's just break it down and then talk about this in takes for the game, because
okay.
If you've been watching Army Navy a lot, like there's the baseline analysis is both these teams run a lot, which is that's a stupid way to look at that. Well, don't think about that. But if you think about like the way that Navy usually runs, they're usually more of like a quarterback centric run off tackle, try to work that speed option and get outside type of team. That is not what they have this year. They've run 780 offensive plays this season. Almost 40% have gone to the fullback. Another 25% have been quarterback keepers. Another 16% have been passes. So 80% of their plays have, been some element of that midline play or a pass. They lost quarterback Ty Lavatai to injury. Now they've got Xavier Arline in there. Arline's just 3 of 10 passing for 60 yards with a touchdown, interception, 6 sacks. Must be said, he's doing a nice job directing the offense. 68 carries for 274 yards, 3 touchdowns, about 4 yards per carry. He is just enough of a running threat to break out fullback Dabo Fofana. And Fofana is the guy doing the real damage, right? Yeah. I mean, this is kind of like the Air Force game, but even more so. He's the key to the mids resurgence. 175 carries for 749 yards, 4.3 yards per carry, which is still not like elite, but it's pretty good. 6 rushing touchdowns. And then they haven't listed Mikael Haywood for whatever reason as a wide receiver. He is a slot back. 69 carries for 451 yards, 6.5 yards per carry, 7 catches for 112 yards and 1 touchdown. And then, they've got Masai Maynard there as a passing quarterback. I haven't watched Navy enough to actually see him play, so I don't know what to tell you, but he's about a 58% passer. Take that for what it's worth. I mean, it's not great. Like they've never gotten to the point of averaging 300 yards per carry, but they've done okay at times.
Okay. Rob, on defense, are they okay, or is the defense kind of really the belle of the ball?
Like, honestly, I think the defense is what's been keeping them in these contests, the ones that they've won particularly. But when you're looking at, they have, the overall 4th rushing defense in the country, which is pretty doggone good. Allowing just 85.6 yards per carry or per game and 3.1 yards per carry. They're more susceptible to the pass if they don't, get to the quarterback when they're blitzing. So they get about 270 yards passing per game, but they've also had 32 sacks on the season. So they've been able to get to the quarterback, but that could be a result of them run blitzing and just guys getting in the right position because hey, we're just trying to stop the run or trying to get in position, and the guys break loose because they can't get blocked because the blocking scheme is not suitable for whatever defense they're attacking with. All that blitzing means they got a ball hogging defense with a +4 turnover margin, despite a bunch of not so great offensive play. So when you look at the number of turnovers they've forced, they have 8 interceptions, 11 forced fumbles, and mostly strip sacks on those forced fumbles. So, again, blitzer's getting loose, quarterback is to the blind side, they pop it out of his hand and they recover. Navy's top 4 tackles have all forced at least 2 fumbles this season. Against them, they have 6 interceptions thrown and 9 fumbles. They have 4 of the top 5 tacklers on the team are linebackers. And so as a guy that plays defensive line, what you got to understand is when the linebackers are getting loose, that means the defensive lines are sucking up blocks. And so those guys are able to move, within that 3 to 5 yard space behind the defensive line. So yeah, Jonathan Marshall with 88 tackles. He's got 41 solo, 10.5 sacks. That's unbelievable, especially for a linebacker at a service academy, right? Because normally we just don't get guys that loose into the offensive backfield. He's got 7 passes defended, 1 interception, and 2 forced fumbles. Colin Ramos has 71 tackles, 31 solos, 3.5 sacks, an interception, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. And then Rayshawn Lane III has 67 tackles, 40 solo, 1 sack, 4 passes defense, 2 forced fumbles, and 2 fumble recoveries. So the bottom line is for our offense against the Navy defense, again, I swear it's the same formula every week. Hold on to the football and don't turn it over. I mean, that's something that happens in every college football game, and it seems cliche, but cliches are for a reason. Hold on to the doggone ball. And then the other piece of it is because this game will probably be a little bit more emotional than most because, for both Army and Navy, this is their season saver, right? This is the bowl game for both teams. And so I think you're going to see a lot more aggressive play offensively, but you're also going to see the ball probably hit the turf. As always in an Army-Navy game, one of the two teams will probably fumble on the first or second series because that's just the way that it goes because there's so much emotion and they're so amped up to play the game. But I'll pause there and pass it back to Jordan for special teams.
Yeah, so kicker punter Daniel Davies has done most of the kicking this season. Bijan Nichols was back as of the Notre Dame game, 2 for 2 field goals, long of 45 yards. 3 out of 4 on extra points this season. And then Riley Reithman averages 45 yards a punt this season. So James is not here this week to kind of give us the special teams field position breakdown, but I think Navy has the edge in terms of special teams. But Dan, what are your just kind of overall takes on the game? What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, this one sets up a lot like the Air Force game, but Navy has a better defense, and they're not as consistent on offense. So, very similar to that game. If they can bottle up Dabo Fofana, which I think they can based on the fact that they bottled up Brad Roberts, then, that sets you up in a position to make things interesting, right? But, Navy does not mind punting and playing defense. They punted 6 times against UCF. Like, they'll punt. That's a good defense, right? I'm worried because Army could not sustain offense against Air Force. And this defensive team is way better than the Zoomies on that side of the ball. And I'm also worried that this coaching staff will think that they can win on defense if they just sort of wait for the mids to make a mistake. And if they try that, I'm afraid they're just going to lose, but, slowly, which is kind of what happened in the Air Force game. It's like you're waiting for something to break, waiting for something to break, and nothing ever breaks. And you lose, freaking 10-7 or whatever. And finally, I'm super worried that the offensive staff is going to fixate on some play or player that they think is like a game-breaking advantage. Last year in this game, that was Tyrell Robinson trying that stupid trap play to the inside, which they must have run 10 times. Against Air Force, they tried that QB draw 17 freaking times. Like, this approach has failed twice. It is not going to work this Saturday. So, no shiny objects sort of dominating our field of view. Let's just play football. And, on the other side, on the plus side, this team has been great since they've gotten tackle Booby Law back and sort of realized what they have and tackle Shane Buckingham in the power running game. These guys mash Troy, which is also an elite rushing defense and not with trickeration. I think, they've been running that 2 fullback set really successfully. It is hard to scheme against 2 265-pound fullbacks coming down to blow you up. If they can do that and, spring tired Tyler loose a little bit on the edge, like, that's something that they could make work.
Rob, any thoughts on what Dan just kind of unpacked?
Yeah. So again, same thing, different verbiage. I think Army has to open the playbook, use the split backs a lot more. I mean, we've shown that we've got 4 or 5 talented split backs in the backfield. Get them loose on a pass, pitch. How about that? When you turn a quote unquote triple option team into a quarterback dive or into, it's a double option, whether it be the fullback or the quarterback, that's a lot easier to scheme against, right? Because all I have to do is if I'm a defensive end, I stay at home and then I pursue to the ball because I know if the quarterback's taking it or the fullback's taking it, I don't have to worry about the pitch man. So then you start getting, complacent, and then that's when you hit them on the edge and come outside. The other piece of it is Navy blitzes a lot. So being able to run some of those delayed type runs that Army has been running, particularly to the unbalanced side, that half a second difference is going to be the difference between somebody getting picked up for a block and going 10 yards or 25 yards versus somebody getting blown up in the backfield. So again, I think the offensive line has been working. You just kind of shift the point of attack just a little bit and then run the playbook. I would like to see an offensive performance similar to the one in UConn, because if Army runs the offense like they ran the offense against UConn, I don't think Navy will be able to keep up, to be honest. I think Navy will come out flat in the first half defensively. So that's a great opportunity for Army to get on the board and have a little bit of cushion. Of course, you don't want to play like that. You want to keep going for the throat as early and often, but take advantage of all the time off. They've been off. It'll be almost 20 days by the time the game kicks. And so, regardless of how much you try to stay on top of it, you've had Thanksgiving and finals, before this game. So mentally, they're probably in a different headspace than they were coming out of the UCF game at the end of the season. And then again, my last point, and I think we have said this and we beat it up all season, just don't put our special teams in a position where they're the difference in the game. We want consistent play from them, which is great, but rarely if ever, I think the TCU kicker is the only kicker in college football that could come out with 7 seconds on the clock and just boot a 45-yarder and not even think about it, And I think by preventing that from being the difference in the game, I think we have a better opportunity of winning. But it goes back to, don't let Navy stay close, because if you have a chance to hang 50 on them, hang 50 on them. Because if you're like, oh, we'll just, play conservatively in the second half because we're up by 10 or 15 points, it's going to bite them.
Yeah, Rob, I think you're right. And I think we need to come out strong. And I think the difference maker in this game is going to be is whether or not we can play a complete game of football. And, we could argue that, UConn and UMass, and I still don't think that we have played a complete game of football this season. And I think if we do that, it won't be an issue. But I don't know. We've been inconsistent all year. Dan, you talked about last week in the uniforms and how that military campaign kind of got off on the wrong foot, and then they got it back. And this is the only opportunity to get it back. I know a lot of people on Twitter were like, "Oh, we're not going to a bowl game." Like we're 5 and 6, 5 and 7. Like no, we're not going to a bowl game. Yeah. Like what? In what world do you go to a bowl game with 5 wins, 2 of them being FCS? Like no one wants us at a bowl game. No one's going to wait for us. And
all they had to do was hit a 41-yard field goal to go to a bowl game. It's what are you going to do? They're 5 and 6, but the difference between 5 and 6 and 8 and 3 at this point in the season is maybe like 5 to 6 plays. But those breaks fell our way in 2017 and 2018. They didn't fall our way this year. How many times is yearling Kelvin Hopkins going to come off the bench and lead the team down in a minute to tie up the game against, what would turn out to be a 10-win Temple team? Like, it happened once. Be glad that you saw it, but Army couldn't quite pull that off this year. And here we are.
I think it's just an embarrassment of riches. I think we've gotten complacent in our cheering for Army just because, hey, we've got a good coach. We've got a good coaching staff. We've got some great athletes. And sometimes you have an off year. And unfortunately for us, it's orders of magnitude. So an off year for Alabama is 2 losses, right? Just because we're used to those guys running the table. But for Army, an off year could be a 4 or 5 game skid. And that's reality. And if you watch college football, you see kind of the sine wave of that happening for lots of different programs. So it's not just Army. Look at freaking, TCU.
Yeah.
We weren't talking about them, 2 years ago. They were on the outside looking in. Now they're in the playoff and everybody's upset like, oh, they lost 1 game. Yeah, they're still like the best 1-loss team in the country. Like, do the math. People are mad at the Buckeyes. But again, college football, it's very simple. 2 things about bowl games: teams that travel and teams that bring in money. You don't want to host a bowl game that's going to lose cash. That just doesn't make any sense. And so when you look at Army, yes, do Army's fans travel all the time? And for us to have an off year like this as a team, everybody's upset. But the reality of it is these things happen. It could have been worse. Like, hey, look, we had a great season during COVID, which probably shouldn't have happened for most teams. And Army was able to put together a schedule. There were whole teams that sat out for a year and didn't have the opportunity to play. So, rant over. But the bottom line is, when you have an embarrassment of riches, sometimes it just doesn't go your way.
It is worth wondering what is the floor for like a bad team, and a bad season for this team. In 2015, that was 2 wins, losing a bunch of 1-score games. In 2019, that was 5 wins, but they got blown out of a bunch of games. This year, it's 5 wins, but they lost a bunch of close games. And who knows, maybe we get to 6 wins and it's like we sort of reset the floor, and that's where the program is, and that's okay. One thing, if you will indulge me, Jordan, the line on this game opened at Army -2.5. And right now, depending on where you bet, you might even be able to get them at Pick'em. I hate to say this, but statistically, the Black Knights look like a better bet. They're averaging 6.1 yards per play versus Navy's 4.7, which is usually a flashing sign for pro bettors. And both teams are averaging around 6 yards allowed on defense. And believe it or not, Army has marginally better scoring defense and a much better red zone defense. So, Army should win this game, but it scares the crap out of me to say that because I thought that last year too.
Yeah, and it's just something about Navy. On paper, we're always better than them, and just for some reason they're able to do it. And Ken Niamontalolo is just, you call it Teflon Don. Like, nothing sticks to him. Like, he's always like kind of ends up like right side. Like, he's the cockroach in the nuclear holocaust that like doesn't get like. He always somehow manages to like wiggle out of like the worst situations. I don't know what it is, but like that is his best asset as a coach, is just his ability to just figure it the hell out, and just like things happen. Things always seem to kind of go his way. And when they don't, the Navy fan base loses their minds and say, oh, well, it's because of our shoes and whatever else. But like, that's what scares me about this game. Because if it was any other team in the country, if it was Air Force, I'd be so much more confident. But because it's Navy, it's like that giant question mark. And it's like, all right, like statistically we're better. Vegas thinks we're better. Like, I don't know.
I mean, Vegas is not sold on us being better. There's been a lot of money coming in on Navy plus 2.5, or, 2.5 points, a pretty big move in the line.
Yeah, that's why the line moved, for real. And the other part of it is, it like Navy reminds me of like that dude that you served with that freaking chain smoked a half a pack of cigarettes and then runs a 10:30 on the 2 mile. Like,
for sure.
Like, I hate this guy, because it's just like, it's not supposed to work out that way, but somehow it always does. And I think last year, I think everybody was overconfident, from the fan base, probably to the coaches, and even to the players, and it bit us. And I think from a whole of Army fandom perspective, you can't go into a football game like that. And we all learned that hard lesson, and I think everybody's kind of like tiptoeing around the edges of it. It's like, yes, do we want Army to win? Absolutely. But are we going to say, hey, well, statistically, we have all these dominant categories? No. It's like, can't do that. And again, I think at some point we forgot that it was a rivalry game, and you got to throw records out the window, because they certainly did. Because like, if you go back and you watch the last 2 minutes of the 2016 game, like the look of utter despair and confusion on the Navy fans, because they were like, we're going to lose to Army. How did this happen? How did this happen?
For sure.
Because they've been so cocky for so many years, and they're like, well, we could go 11-1 as long as that one win is Army, and we're going to get it because we've done it for so many years. And so now, that there's parity for a couple of years, we are starting to lean into that kind of thinking, and it's not safe. No. I mean, like, you will be sorely disappointed if you go hang 10 grand on Navy to cover or Army to win, and it bites you just because you're looking purely at statistics. It's football. Things happen.
2018, Army had a much better teams in 2017 and 2018. And 2017 was a way close game, and 2018 was closer than it needed to be. And both of those things were 4 and 5 years ago now. So that's ancient history.
Well, it feels like it was, last week.
It does feel like that.
Yeah,
it does. But 4 and 5 years ago, throw that out the window. Here we are. We are where we are.
So gentlemen, obviously it's Army Navy, right? We've already said this is the bowl game for both of these teams. Neither of us are going to the bowl. Do we think anything else is at stake beyond just, bragging rights, anything like that? Recruiting, like I got all that stuff, but like if you're Ken Niumatalolo and you've lost what 4, 5 out of the last 6 and had a rough season, like
I guarantee he will tell you that he's won 2 of the last 3.
Well, sure. It's all about perspective. They've won,
Sure.
15 out of the last 20 or whatever you want to say. But, last year, Jasper got fired, then rehired and all this other stuff. Does this game, do we think that that's going to have implications for Navy? And the same thing for Army. We had high hopes for this season. And all of a sudden we're sitting at 5-6, lost to Air Force. We lose to Navy sitting at 5-7, not that, Uncle Jeff, St. Jeffrey Munkin is gonna, get sent packing. We know that's not gonna happen. But does he maybe make some adjustments? What do we think?
I think he's going to make some adjustments regardless, because we just hired so many coaches right at the last minute, and you'll never convince me that didn't impact, especially the front half of the season. Yeah. It seems like it took them a while to realize what they had. We saw them on 4th and short, 3rd and short, 4th and short, failing repeatedly with the fullback dive with Jacoby Buchanan because, he's got an ankle and the guards just aren't getting the push and blah, 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 whatever. Down the stretch, they figured that out. But up front, like, I think if you'd had the same staff, they probably would have picked that up a little faster. But they didn't have the same staff, and ditto for stuff that happened on the defense. So, yeah, I mean, the same stuff happened on the defense. Obviously, we all saw that. And yet somehow, this team ends the year with like 4 goal line stands that are ridiculous. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. I honestly, and just to jump in, I think ultimately what it boils down to is you had a lot of late coaching moves for Army. And the culture is completely different. It is not like if I was going to UTSA or if I was walking into a locker room at Troy, dealing with those players is going to be completely different than dealing with any of the service academy players, let alone will that be Army, Navy, or Air Force. I think there is a huge difference in the quality of candidate that comes to those schools, and not in the sense of physical tools, but also in the mental tools. I think our players are a lot more coachable. But you have to realize that as a coach. So sometimes you can't phone it in and pray for athleticism like some coaches, like some coaches are able to do, because you see it all the time. Like, oh, hey, look, you know what? Like, look at Ohio State. They had some great athletes, and then they got outcoached by Michigan because they didn't change their defense in the second half. That wasn't a player problem. That was a coaching problem. And so when you look at games like that, you have to understand what tools you have and how to best use them. And I think the learning curve was a little bit steep for some of the coaches coming in for Army because they came in so late in the coaching carousel.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And, it kind of makes you wonder, that, all these other schools are firing people in the middle of the season. They're trying to hire people in the middle of the season. Is that something that Army should entertain in the future? Not that we necessarily need to fire people every year, but hey, if we can get people in sooner and give them more time, is that something that's worthwhile? I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Let me put it to you this way. I'll be surprised if we don't see some moves starting, pretty soon after this game. Just
like Sunday morning soon?
No, I don't know. Like, I'm not saying people are going to get sent packing or whatever, but if they have an opportunity that they haven't had for a little bit more, for an accelerated like reflection on what worked and what didn't. So I don't know. Let's just see how it goes. Let's win one game first and then talk about the season after the season.
All right. I can get behind that. Last thing I have for Army Navy game, jerseys. We talked about them last week. Rob's shaking his head. If you're watching the video, you can see that Dan and I are both repping our 82nd Airborne jerseys from the 2016 game. Rob, the Airborne Colonel.
The only one of us to serve in the 82nd.
Yeah. Does not have the jersey. How does that work? And if I turn my backdrop off, you can see my 82nd plaque hanging up. It's like, I guess I could say, well, I got enough 82nd stuff, so I don't need the jersey. That's my low hanging fruit. But I think, honestly, the uniform thing, I think the Dean summed it up best in his video. If you have not watched that, you should. I think that's the best way of exploring the conversation about the uniforms this year. I think, honestly, again, just this is probably going to be one of the better games, and it's a good thing that it's going to be the only thing on television this weekend, because it's going to put a lot of shine on the service academies. Because, again, the only thing better than watching, two great teams go at it is two great teams that are like brothers fighting in the backyard. And I think that's what this is going to be, because I think, Navy's taking their lumps, Army's taking their lumps. Army's been a little bit better at kind of recovering some of those things. But you also have to think, if you look at Army season, like we paid two guys that ended up in conference championships between Coastal Carolina and Troy. Those guys were the champions for their respective divisions and played for
UTSA. UTSA also played. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you look at the overall, backdrop of the teams that we played some really good competition, and like next year's schedule is probably just as hard or harder than this season's schedule. So the main thing is, it's like, hey, are the kids coachable? Are the coaches in position to make the decisions in a timely enough manner and make those adjustments? And we talked about it on the roundtable, is you basically have two periods where you need to make adjustments as a coach: at halftime and then about midway through the season. You've seen Army make those midway through the season corrections because the defense is still kind of bend but don't break. But gosh dog, man, like you have 4 freaking goal line stands in 2 games. Like that doesn't happen with a team that's really like poorly coached or struggling.
That's true. That's the truth.
Yeah, Dan, our jerseys, they mean more, but only to a certain subset of people who understand what they mean. Versus Navies are kind of, big picture and NASA and like, that's cool and whatever. Like, is that fair? Is that true? Or is that just kind of what Navy wants you to believe?
I don't know what Navy wants you to believe. They want you to believe that they got a lot of astronauts, which is fine. I mean, that's great. They can sign up for Elon Musk's Mars colony as soon as that thing rolls around. Send me a postcard. Look, Army is advertising who they are. 82nd, 10th Mountain, now the first AD, like all these uniforms are representative of who the Army is, what the Army's doing. Everybody, half my timeline has served in one of these units every single year. 0.003% of Annapolis grads are going into NASA. And I don't think it caught on with a lot of them, but some of the recruits, I mean, who knows, man? Like I said, anything to keep from talking about the fact that most of these dudes are just working on a ship.
Yeah, that's fair. But at the end of the day, this game really showcases what's best about America, and in a lot of ways, we need that as a country, as a nation.
Yeah, that's true.
And as an Army, I've read a lot of stuff the last couple of weeks talking about the American public's confidence in the military is at a decades long low, and you talk about the Afghanistan withdrawal last year, and that was not a good look for us. And then,
at the same time, they had the Afghanistan jerseys.
Well, yeah, exactly. And then the spring break incident earlier this year, like it's, I think this game is a good opportunity to remind people what's so special about West Point, what's so special about, the Army and our nation, everything like that. So I'm looking forward to the game, looking forward to seeing what happens. And, damn it, I just really hope we win too. So any final thoughts on the greatest rivalry in sports?
Yeah, I just got one thing, and far be it for me to promote somebody else's stuff, but there's a British dude that does reaction videos, and he did a reaction to the intro to the 2017 Army-Navy game. And you need to find that and watch it to get an outside perspective of what it actually means. This dude watched like 30 seconds of it and had the JFK speech, and he's like, I had to pause this because I got goosebumps. And so we as Army fans or veterans completely forget how important that is to everybody on the outside looking in. That message of like, hey, look, for 364 days a year, these guys are, friendly with each other. There's that one day where they're these bitter rivals. And then after that, these guys go out and fight, joint force in the country's wars. And like the number of times that you've bumped into, a Navy grad, downrange, sitting in the jock, like literally, I can tell you the 2016 game, it took some convincing, but we let the G3, let us put it up on the big screen and we're watching it. And so I'm sitting there with a row of Anglico guys from the Navy and some Air Force people, and we're all sitting there watching the game. And it didn't really matter who won, because it was like, it was a game in reality, like these guys are on the field, but we are also on the field, and we just happened to be able to take a peek into what these guys were doing and representing their respective services.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for kind of putting that in perspective. This is going to be a horrible segue, but let's talk fact or fiction.
Fact.
That is correct.
Or fiction.
Incorrect.
Dan, you're up first.
Yeah, sorry about that. I stepped on the sounder there. Army rushes for at least 3.5 yards per carry. That would be a substantial improvement over the last couple of matchups. Jordan.
I'm gonna say fact, because if we can't get the ball moving on the ground, we're not gonna win this football game. We throw better than Navy does, but we need to run better, at least as good, or if not better than they do, or it's not gonna be good.
That's my feeling about it too. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I'm gonna say yes. Fact. They need to be like 4.2 yards per carry, because I think there's the ability to do that. We've got the size, we've got the push, particularly with our two featured tackles. And if it doesn't happen, like Jordan said, we're gonna be in trouble.
Yeah. We'll go fact agreement with the caveat that this is probably the decisive point of the game. So, but yeah, let's say fact.
All right, Rob.
I'm gonna say Army scores twice with the B-backs. I think that's something that's kind of gone away in the last couple of weeks. Like, we haven't seen a lot of our fullbacks getting in there, and I know Jacoby Buchanan scored a couple the other game, but it's not our first choice. You know, it seems like the quarterback power has been the play of the day on more than one occasion. So at least 2 scores with the B-backs this game.
I'll say fiction. You just laid out the rationale. The only way that I think that they score twice with the B-back is if somebody like Markel Johnson breaks one for a long run, which that could totally happen, especially on some kind of inside counter. But that's probably not the way I would bet.
Yeah, I'm going to say fiction as well. This game tends to be very low scoring, and I just don't think we're going to score a lot of points. And so I think, the ability for the B-backs to even score is going to be low. And then we have so many other people who I think we're probably going to be trying to get the ball to. I would love to see them score 4 touchdowns. Like, that would be fantastic. But I just statistically, I don't think it's going to work out. But we'll see.
Yeah, I'm going to say fact, and in the immortal words of John Madden, you get the big guy score, you get the big guy dance. So
there you go. We love the big guy dance. So beautiful. I'm going to go ahead and I have a fact or fiction, which is a little more long term, and then I'm going to go ahead and steal James's fact or fiction slot for this week. Fact or fiction: Army throws the ball more than 5 times.
I will definitely say fact.
Yeah, that's a fact for sure.
I think that they need to throw. Boy, it's just a question of how they handle that blitz, because if they can pick that blitz up or maybe roll Tyre out to the outside, give him an RPO on the edge, that's where they could do some damage. They really should. I mean, they got possession receivers. They got a big pass catching tight end. They got all the passing weapons that you want.
Yeah, I think, again, it goes back to the previous discussion. I think the long passes will set up those 2 B-back touchdowns. So I'm going to say fact, because they're going to throw more than 5 for sure. But I don't know. It's frustrating because we've got the talent to throw, and I think sometimes we forget about it.
Yeah, I would like to see us throw, but I don't. That's going into this game. You never know how the coaches are going to call it, because some years they come out and they're like, you know what, what the hell, why not? I'm first play of the game, we're throwing it. And then other years it's like, all right, hey, we're going to run the same 2 plays the entire game.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to find something that works against Air Force and then follow it up with 17 quarterback draws.
Exactly. Oh, this worked once. It's going to definitely work the next 17 times. So I'm going to say fiction, though, just because I think we're going to be a little bit more conservative. We're going to try to keep it on the ground, and I would like to see them throw, but I think after last year, maybe we're going to try to do what works. I don't know. We'll see. I would like to see that. And speaking of play calling and doing what works, my fact or fiction is Brent Davis to Citadel? ? Fact or fiction?
Oof. That's a good question. The Citadel did just fire their coach, and I have not heard of an announcement.
2 weeks ago, they decided not to renew his contract, and that's the last thing they've said.
Yeah, that carousel slot is open, so you see that horse just moving around on the merry-go-round, waiting for somebody to jump on.
Yeah. You know what? I'm gonna shut my mouth and just say that I wish him well. I think he's been a great coach at Army, and if he gets the opportunity to coach at his alma mater, I wish him the best of luck. So I don't know. That's kind of a wimpy answer, but there you go.
I'm going to make a bold statement here, and I'm going to say fact. I think who doesn't want to go back to their alma mater. Now, if you're Scott Frost, that's probably not going to work out for you. Fair. I mean, I think his mentality and his coaching, it fits with their offense that they run down there at the Citadel. So, you've been at a big time program. There's a chance to kind of go home. I wouldn't be surprised. So I'm going to say fact. If it doesn't happen, I'm not going to be upset either way. I think it's an opportunity. If the opportunity presents itself and he takes it, great. If he doesn't, we'll make do with Brett Davis for another season. I mean, it's not that, from my perspective, it's not that he's bad or good. It's just, again, we got to get off the shiny objects. I think that's my biggest complaint with him is like, hey, I've got the speed guy, so I've got to use him, but you've got a whole bunch of talented other players. And I think that mentality is more suited for a smaller school because you may not have the diversity and depth and breadth of players that you have in Army at the Citadel. So I think it would be a better fit for him, but doesn't necessarily mean he's going to take it.
Let me just say, he catches so much flack, not just from us, but from everybody. And I hope we all realize that it's a hard thing, right? I mean, he's in a bad spot because you're the offensive coordinator of like a pretty small offense. And I just.
And oh, by the way,
yeah.
You have probably a good, 10 to 15% of our alumni are actual strategists. So,
yeah. And everybody is unafraid to call you out. Like half the fan base is looking for an excuse to call you out. So it's a tough deal.
When you have to go to football games for 4 years, you feel like you're,
you're invested. Team. That's true.
Exactly. I don't know Brent Davis well enough to be able to say, oh, he wants to do this or he wants to do that. But, Troy Calhoun had every opportunity to go somewhere else in the Mountain West, didn't take it, and now who's throwing his name around? They win football games every year. He doesn't get mentioned for Jack. Same thing, Ken Niumatalolo had an opportunity to go to BYU. And, that would have been kind of a dream job for him, and he turned it down. And and even Jeff Monken, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, it was like, oh, Jeff's turnaround guy. He could go here, he could go there. He's going to interview here. Like, not to say that he still doesn't have those opportunities, but I think if you're Brent Davis, you're like, okay, what's my ceiling? Is Army going to hire me if Jeff Monken leaves? That's 50-50 at best. And so what do you want to do? Do you want to be the offensive coordinator for the rest of your life? Or do you want to go home relatively to the place you played at and coach that team? So I'm going to say facts. Like I said, I don't know him well enough to know whether he's not going to do that. But I think the fact that it is Brent Davis, it is the Citadel, and it's been 2 weeks without an announcement. A lot of coincidences. So we'll see what happens. We'll update you guys as soon as we know more. And speaking of getting updated, do you like Army football but hate social media? Who doesn't? Social media is terrible. Instead, go to asforfootball.com/subscribe. Get on our mailing list. We send out 1 email per week with links to that week's content. That's it. It's too easy. Don't walk into that tailgate Saturday morning looking like an idiot because you don't know who or what or anything that's happening. Subscribe to our mailing list, get some content, spend 5 minutes reading the preview article, understand what's going on, understand the keys to the game, and then you can go up to your classmates and have an intelligent adult conversation with them.
And they will all think you're cool.
Everyone's going to think you're cool.
That's right.
Who has the favorite thing this week?
All right. So I have a favorite thing, and it's kind of, again, shameless plug for the other show. Dan and I put a lot of work into the college football roundtable this season. We've got co-promotion with Trigger Joe from the Veteran Trash Talk team. That is really starting to come together, and we're going to do a bowl game preview and then probably a midway through the bowl season kind of show. But I really would appreciate if everybody kind of checked that thing out because we put a lot of effort into it. It's improved even this year by comparison to the first one that we did to the last one that we did. Yeah. And
like the Army team, we finally found our stride. It took a little while to figure out which who needed to be in at right and left tackle.
Yeah, for sure. But I legitimately think that it's a really good program, and it complements this show very well. So if you are not a diehard Army fan, check out the College Football Roundtable. We sprinkle in enough of the other academies and the rest of college football in there. So I think it would be a great opportunity to kind of catch up on some content that you wouldn't normally check out, particularly because, after this season is over, we're going to continue to kind of roll with both of those things. But that's my favorite thing. My least favorite thing is the fact that both of you guys have 82nd jerseys. So if there is a secondhand market for the 82nd jersey, please hit me up. I will pay a modest wage to get myself an 82nd jersey, and I'll pass it back to Jordan.
Thanks, Rob. Guys, that's it. It's Army-Navy week. Let's do it. I will see you guys in Philly. It's supposed to be like 33 degrees. So dress warm and go Army, beat Navy.
Beat Navy.
Bean Tavy. Thanks for listening to the Ask for Football Army Football Show. Tune in next week as Ask for Football brings you more Army football analysis. We'd like to thank our sponsor, BuyerBarn.com. BuyerBarn is the world's first online platform for auctions and sales of farm animals. BuyerBarn is dedicated to helping small farmers in America and has extended special discounts to military veterans who want to continue the growth of the small farming industry. Go to BuyerBarn.com/military. That's BuyerBarn, BYREBARN.com to learn more, or to get started, email them at info@BuyerBarn.com. Thanks again for listening to the Army Football Show. And as always, beat Navy.